Welcome to They Talk Funny. My special guest today is Michelle Shaughnessy. A couple people are tuning in already. Please just make sure you hit like, and if you have any questions, you can just drop them right into the counter, and they're gone. That's how quickly fame works on the internet. A couple curious people. So we are broadcasting on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. If anyone knows how Twitch works, you can let me know. Appreciate it. Now, Michelle Shaughnessy is a comedian in Canada, has toured the country, has appeared on television in scripted, unscripted, did very well on Canada's Top Comic with the Sirius Xm. Yeah, you've been in commercials. All right, you've done it all.
I've never done a commercial. I've never done a commercial. No, okay. I've auditioned for literally like, I'm going to say 500 commercials, and I've never booked a commercial.
I'm really surprised by that. For a second there, when you said I never did commercials, I thought you were just going to say, well, I've never sold out. But
no,
you want to sell out.
Yeah, what's funny is I don't even eat, like, I'm a vegan, but I audition for like hot dog commercials. I don't care. I'll do it. I audition for McDonald's. I just never get them. But the annoying part is I get callbacks all the time, which is fine because I'm an actor member, so I get a $50 check.
$50,
but yeah. I've literally never got one, and I do them all the time. But if it wasn't for those $50 checks, I would probably be like, I'm not going to audition for these anymore.
Okay, just a quick little side note. Zoom auditions, callbacks, getting that $50 check while just sitting at home, still keeping the pajama pants on. Isn't that awesome? Or
yeah, it's not... yeah, it's not bad. I don't mind the Zoom callbacks, but Zoom auditions, like the first audition being on Zoom, it's awful. I don't know why they do that. It should just all be tape. But I'm so used to it now that like I couldn't imagine ever having to like go and audition in person and, you know, take a Uber or get on the street. Like it just seems like such a waste of time that like we all used to do it that way.
Yeah, no, it's the industry has changed. We'll probably get into that a little bit later. Now, a lot of your stand-up is like storytelling based. Would you say that's fair?
You know, maybe. I mean, whenever anyone asks me to like categorize my stand-up, I never know what to say because I don't really think about it that way. But I guess story, yeah. I mean, I guess so because it's not really like set up joke, and it's all mostly real. Like it's all life experience. So I guess that would put it in the story category.
Before we get on any further, I'm pretty sure the internet would be upset if I didn't ask you to introduce the fluffy doggo.
Oh God, he just needs attention right now. This is our new puppy, RoboCop. You can follow him on Instagram at RoboCop the Pom. He is a Pomeranian, and he's really cute, but he's a nightmare. I'm not gonna lie. I do have another dog. I have a Chihuahua running around somewhere. She might make an appearance later. But she's 11, so she's probably taking it a bit more chill. But he is about 10 months, and he is full of energy, loves to bark, and loves to chew on everything. That's perfect. Yeah, RoboCop the Bomb. So he's very cute, though.
Definitely is. Now, who were your influences when it comes to? I mean, like it's a lot of story based. It's a lot about I mean, I just rewatched the bit about you and the temp work. Mm-hmm. Do you think having a lot of different jobs, like keeping a job for a long time as a stand-up comic, made writing a little bit easier because there was more life experience, more varied life experience to draw from?
I don't know. Like, I guess it just depends on, I don't know how to answer that. Like, I think for me, when I was a temp, yes, because I would do no work. I would literally just sit. Okay, come on, come back. Sorry, he needs attention. I would literally just sit there and write in a notebook all day, right? So when I was doing that, that was great. But the times that I was waitressing or times like that, not really, because you're just tired and angry about having to work and interact with people. But I haven't had a job in a long time, and I think I've had other stuff to write about because I got married, and I mean, I guess that's it. But I have a good solid chunks of material about that kind of stuff too. So I guess it just depends on the person, right? It does feel weird now that my life's so different. Like I really wrote my last headline set really quickly. Like it came to me really quickly because I hated doing jokes that weren't true anymore about having the day job or being single or going on date. Like I felt like a fraud almost. Mm-hmm. So I think that made me write faster and work harder than like anything else has before, because it just didn't feel authentic anymore.
That is that's a really good point. The mm-hmm. being authentic when you're on stage, I guess from what you said, it is harder to sell things that are no longer true in your life when you're on stage. So do you think that's true for most comics, or do you think that's just your truth?
I mean, it's true for a lot of comics that I know and that I like to watch and stuff, but then there are people who, you know them too, they've had the same set for 10 years. So I imagine it probably doesn't bother them, or they probably would have changed it. Do you know what I mean? So I think
maybe their life is just sort of in stasis.
That's a good point, actually. I think some people just don't care as long as they're getting laughs. But I don't know. I always felt not even so much, obviously the authenticity part bothered me, but I also felt, go play. You're distracting me through cuteness. I also felt kind of like it was even the back of the room. Like, you know, like from stand up, sometimes we worry too much about what the other comics are thinking. So I think it would always be in my mind too. If I was doing an old bit, it's like, oh, I was on a date. It's like, oh, well, they know I'm married, or they know, I mean, it just didn't, you know, I care a lot what people think, even though I shouldn't. So I think that also had a lot to do with it.
That's like, I mean, for me, it's like if I did a joke about dating, but then I did a joke about being married, like having material mm-hmm. from different, you know, points of my life coming up in one set, that I would find that kind of crossover. But you were worried about just being inauthentic, which I think that's cool into sticking to the truth. But who would be your influences, your early influences, and do you think any of their voices have sort of stuck with you over time?
No, I wouldn't say any of their voices, in the sense that, like, I mean, I had influences, but they weren't necessarily influences that I was like, oh, that's the style of comic I'm going to be. They were influences in the sense that, like, the person I think I always kind of bring up when people ask me this would be Martha Chavez, because I remember watching her on TV when I was like a teenager. Like I watched her on, I don't know whatever festival it was, but I remember seeing her. Yeah, but I remember seeing her and being like, oh, because I'd never, you know, saw live comedy before. I never really, like, whenever you kind of flick through the channels late at night and a comic came on, generally it was a guy. So I remember watching her and being like, this is awesome. And then when I first started comedy, I like reached out to her and was like, oh my God, I love you. And she was like, come to the show, like come. And I went, and she picked on me and my friend in the audience the whole night, and we loved it. Like we were like, she's like, oh, you skinny bitches. Like, and I was like, yeah, she called me skinny, but I loved her. And she was so nice after the show. And so I think her definitely, because she's so hardworking. She's been in it for so long, and she's constantly has new material too. Like I've seen her perform so many times, like even just at open mics and at clubs. Like she's kind of one of those comics that, you know, some comics, like they kind of got in the headlining mode and then you don't see them at the open mics anymore. You don't see them at the bar shows. She's never been like that. Like she's always been a hustler, and I just have mad respect for that. So that's the first name that comes to mind for sure. Mm-hmm. I think comics who have kind of been able to pave their own path, like I think a Jerry D would be another one as well. Because I think he, from the get-go, was very, you know, knew what he was doing in terms of like looking at comedy like a business. And that's something that I didn't do for a really long time. And I wish I did that earlier. And I think watching his success grow and being able to open for him and work with him, that was one of the things that really inspired me to be like, okay, this is a business. I am a business. This isn't just about, you know, having fun in my 20s anymore. So I think that those two are definitely like names that come to mind, and Kate Davis for sure, because, you know, she's always working on new stuff as well, always. And I just have
my
really
guest next week, actually.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And Martha was several episodes ago. I think might have been before Christmas.
Cool.
I really love the fact that all of your influences are CanCon.
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously there's American comics that I like and stuff, but they never really felt, for me personally, like so much as an influence, because I think for me, it was more about the people that I would see and work with. And it's almost like it's attainable. Does that make sense? In the sense that like they're in front of you and you get to watch them, as opposed to just watching like a celebrity on TV where you're like, oh, that's a totally different world.
Because you're only seeing it the one time, whereas with the Canadian performers that you get the chance to see live and work with, it's you get to see how a set will evolve over time, especially like being on tour with someone.
Absolutely. And you can also get to like sometimes just watch the audience and see what they're reacting to and what they're not. And I think that's really cool sometimes.
I don't know what RoboCop is digging into, but I can
He's
hear it.
Literally, he has a stuffed animal bee, and he's literally running back and forth across the living room like a maniac. Like that's what he does. He literally, if I stop playing with him for like a minute, he'll just grab a toy and start running like insane back and forth. Like, yeah, I know he sounds like a monster. He is a monster, but I love him.
RoboCop, it's Police Jesus from that film. So he died, came back from the dead. Never mind. There's a whole allegory. There's videos on it about it. Now, you mentioned you writing and like when you had the temp job, writing in the notebook. Other jobs, it was a bit more difficult because you were just tired and physically you don't have the time to be writing as you're working when you're waiting or when you're serving tables, etc. But now that this is your career, do you set aside time every day to write? Are you how?
No, yeah. I don't. And that's the thing too, is it's like I have nothing but time right now and I'm not using it productively at all. Like I really thought like a year ago, pandemic hits, everything. I was like, oh, it's great. I'm going to write a new pilot. I'm going to work on a script. I'm going to write so much material. And now I literally wake up, walk my dogs, drink a pot of coffee, and then Dr. Phil comes on at 2, and I accept that I'm not going to do anything for the rest of the day. Like that's, I mean, I'm just going day by day, man. Oh, and auditions. Like I get a lot of self-tape auditions, and that gives me something to do. But it's really hard to write comedy when you don't know when you're going to get to do it. And I just can't get into the virtual shows. I've done one virtual show that I really liked, but it was in a studio. It was a corporate in a studio, and they had it set up like a club, but everyone was on monitors and I could see them and interact with them. And it was amazing. But I tried to do a couple for my house. And I'm like, this is awful because I feel like I'm bombing like in my house. And then I have to look myself in the mirror. Like I didn't like it. So I have turned down all of those. So it's really hard for me to like write material because it's like, how do I know if it's good if I can't practice it? So I feel a little out of sorts. Like I feel basically like I'm retired. Now, and that's not the worst, but
you mentioned a new pilot. I didn't see in your bio that you had a previous pilot.
I've written 2 pilots, no 3, I guess, but nothing's ever came of them. Like 2 of them were kind of made the rounds where, you have a production company on board and then CBC says no, and then CTV says no, and then you just forget about it. So I've done that, that whole thing, and I wish I want to write more. I know that I want to write more, but I think I just get really like, well, what's the point? Like there's only 2 places to take it in Canada, So I definitely get in my head too much when I start to write. And I'm trying to get better about that. But that's something that I thought I would do a lot of with all this free time. And I'm just not. I don't know what it is.
I know it's a different market. Phoebe Waller, Fleabag.
Yes.
I'm missing a name in there, but
Phoebe Waller-Bridge, is that?
I think that might be it.
Yes.
Phoebe, is it not Phoebe Bridge-Waller? It's Waller-Bridge. Anyhow.
Waller-Bridge, yes.
Like that Fleabag started out as a fringe show, a one-person show. Have you ever thought of taking that kind of idea? Because I've seen your stand-up. You do act outs, not very often, but occasionally you do act outs of the people that you're interacting with or giving your side of the conversation. So it's a way to sort of paint the picture for the audience. Have you ever thought about like maybe doing a short form of your script and to do it as a fringe show or a one person show to see if you can gain more interest in it that way before taking? I know the UK is a completely different market, but
I know. But if I did something like that, I don't think it would be in Canada. I think it would have to be like somewhere else, if that makes sense. Like, I think I would want to be kind of like out of my element. And I hate performing for people that I know. I don't tell friends or family when any of my shows are. I absolutely hate it. I don't invite people. Like, whenever I make a new friend or would have colleagues and they'd be like, oh, we'd love to come see you. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll let you know. And I just never would let people know. And so I feel like I would be too, if I did something like that here, everyone I know would come family and friend wise. And I think I would just be too in my head and not really be able to put my authentic self into it, if that makes sense. Because I'm a very private person in both sections, in comedy life and in personal life. Like, I don't like those worlds to collide at all. And I think that's something that I did a lot of in my 20s, where everything was comedy. Like, all my friends were comedy. Everyone I dated was a comic. Like, every night out at a show. And then I just hit a wall where I was like, this is not what I want for my life. And I think it's great for some people, just not for me. And now I've gone the exact opposite, where it's like, I have maybe like 2 or 3 comics that I actually talk to outside of comedy. And that, you know, Brian had, I think you had last week, he's one of them. He's kind of like in our little pandemic bubble. So that's been really good. So I just have a really small circle of comedy people who know me outside of comedy and off stage. And also in my personal life, I have a really small circle of people who I don't mind if they come to shows and see that version of me, if that makes sense.
I've heard this described before. That people call themselves like a very introverted extrovert.
That's me for sure.
And it seems to be there's a number of comedians who kind of fit that kind of niche, or I don't know, clicks or whatever you want to call it. Actually, the second time I met you, I think, was at Shannon Laverty's Thanksgiving dinner or something of that nature.
That would have been so long ago.
Yeah, I'm old. Thanks for how you were so young. It's weird.
Well, I started when I was a teenager, so I feel like.
And I started when I was 30. So
you know what's funny though? You probably were better at it in terms of like having it be like a thing you do and not just who you were. Because I do find that a lot of people who started later in life are good at that work-life balance. I can't speak for you, but that's what I found. And I feel like, although I started earlier, I feel like I can take the first 10 to 12 years and be like, that was a waste, in terms, not of getting to be a better comic, but in terms of accepting that like being funny on stage isn't all that there is. Like, I still needed to put in the business and the work. And I didn't do that for so long. Like, I just wasted so much time kind of treating it like a party. You know, you start when you're 18 and you're like, this is great. I'm in bars, I'm drinking. And it just becomes like a party every night, you know? And I think once I actually stopped drinking, I realized, oh, I'm not a social person. Like, being social and hanging out after shows was just a vehicle to drink, if that makes sense.
Drink, an excuse to, yes.
Yeah, once I stopped drinking, I realized, I didn't have nearly as many friends as I thought I did. I couldn't stand nearly as many people as I thought I actually liked to spend time with. And I'm not social, and I get really awkward around people, or even talking to people after shows. I'm awful at it. Selling merch, talking to people, I'm so bad at it. I'm trying to be better. Well, whenever comedy returns, but trying to be better, but I'm pretty bad at it.
I'm gonna jump back on something. You said that you don't enjoy performing at home. I think you wrote a sketch about that you put online that involved your husband building a comedy club for you.
I did. That's not what I think of when I think of home. Like, I think of like my hometown. I don't want my parents don't come see me. I won't let them. But performing, you know what's funny is my husband, he was the first guy that I was ever okay with coming to my shows, because he was just so chill about it. You know, I think because, I mean, he's not a comic, but he's in entertainment. So I think he gets it. And any other guy I dated would always not get it, in sense of like, well, what do you mean you talked about going on a date last night? Or they wouldn't want to be talked about or they wouldn't like guys, you know, hitting on me after the shows. But my husband, right from the get-go, was just so chill about it and would laugh. And if I made fun of him and wouldn't, was so good that it just, I never had a problem performing in front of him. And my new album that came out during the pandemic, a lot of it is about him. And he loves it. Like, he thinks it's hilarious. His parents were a little horrified, but he was just so good about it. And it made it so easy for us to like kind of click and be together.
I think that speaks to the dynamic of you two as a couple, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
There is now. You said you haven't been doing much online. How many online sketches have you done while you've been?
Oh, just the one. Like, we've written other ones. We just haven't had time to really do them. My husband's back at work now. Like, when we did that one, we were like, he was working on some shows, and they were both, you know, when COVID first hit, everything was shut down.
Yeah.
So we were just kind of trapped at home for like 6 months with just each other, which was fine. Like, people kept asking, like, well, how is it? Like, is it? And it's kind of like, well, it's not that much different from our regular life, to be honest, because, you know, work ebbs and flows. So he'll have 2 months where he works 15 hours a day, and then he'll have 2 months where he's just at home with me. So that gave us time to do that. But I definitely have more that I want to do with him and with a few other people. But that was the only one that we actually filmed. And we had just kind of like talked about it, and we're like, let's just roll the camera and see what happens. And that was, it was so much fun to do. And we still get like messages about it, and we still get hits on it. Like, I think it's close to like 100,000 views or something already. So, I mean, I say already, it's been like a year, but it did really well for us.
I also, you just kind of brought up a point that is kind of relevant for a lot of performers, is like, if we overthink trying to get a sketch made, we never will get it made. The fact that you just said, let's just roll the camera, see what happens, is perfect. And
it worked. It definitely worked. And a lot of the stuff, like, I wrote a few of the things before, but a lot of it just kind of like came as we were flowing. And I mean, he's different in the sense that, like, I mean, his main job right now is producing and directing. So he's very like, we need to have a script, we need to have a shot, we need to have it. And I was like, no, you're ruining it. I'm like, just roll the camera and see what happens. So we were kind of like arguing as we were talking about doing it.
right.
So, but it really definitely worked. And he was a really good sport in the whole sketch while I tore him apart.
The reaction shots were fantastic. It was very well done. Now, obviously you haven't been writing as much, especially without the incentive of having the chance to perform it. But when you are writing, are there any kind of tools that you go back to over and over again? Like, are you a pen and paper person? Because or were you always typing or audio recording? Or
I have a notebook, but I also just write stuff on my phone constantly. Like, I'm constantly putting stuff in my iPhone notes. But if I'm getting ready for a set and I want to try to like work on some ideas, I will sit down with a pen and paper and do it. I can't type it. I don't know why. I feel like I'm too.
Well, we've heard how your life has been as a receptionist. Yeah. So we know you don't type.
Exactly. So I've never been a computer person, but I mean, computer person, I'm good at computers, but I've never been type my setup. And I know some comics that works great for, but for me, it just never really gelled. I feel like the words, reading them in type, it just makes me be like, oh, is that funny? Like, is that like, but with a notebook, you just kind of don't stop and scribble and scribble and scribble. So that's kind of how I wrote, but I never really had like, a lot of comics have like, they wake up and they have a time to write, and they have that. I've just never really had that. It's like, if something came to me, I would write it. And if nothing came to me, I just wouldn't write that day, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Have you ever used the premise jar or something of that nature? No. So if you are hit with an idea, you don't let it go until it's done, or do you put it in your phone, or you put it somewhere that you can access
I know
later?
what you're saying. Like,
yeah.
If I go through my phone or if I go through old notebooks, I'll just have the most random shit written. Can I swear? Is that?
Yeah,
I did. Sorry.
Okay. No, it's all good.
I have the most random stuff written that sometimes I'm like, I don't even know what I was thinking. And the worst is when I find like old notebooks from when I was a server, because it'll be like gonorrhea, and then it'll just be like someone's order, and it'll be like chicken fingers and fries. Like it's all messed up. So actually, we cleaned out our basement recently, and I found an old box of like maybe 30 notebooks going back. I'm not even gonna say how many years, it will severely age me, but I found some of my first stuff, and it's like so bad, but it's also so good. But I haven't had a chance to go through all of them. So that's my goal in the next, when my taxes are done, is to just sit through and read every single thing in all those notebooks.
You should do a web show of just you reading your early notebooks. It's just
You know, the one notebook I found, I actually did that for in my last album. Um, I have a whole segment called Jokes I'm Ashamed I Wrote. And that was from one of those notebooks where it was like the first jokes that I ever wrote. And it's all authentic. I didn't write them because I've had people ask me, they're like, oh my God, did you write those for that bit? I'm like, no, like I literally found stuff. And like these were jokes that I thought were so good that I would do and be like, I'm so good. And now I read them and it's like, oh my God, what the heck was I thinking? So I did that in my last album and it was so much fun. But I know I definitely have enough to put like a whole set of just that stuff.
how you talked about how you used to believe in these jokes. I interviewed Dale Solomons on this show.
Oh, great.
And Jess was saying about Iman. She says, one of the things I really admired about you was your ability to sell a bad joke. And it's just the fact that you were like, how did I think these were great? And at that time, so in the past, you thought they were great. You were able to sell them. And that's probably why you got laughs at the time.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think I got a lot of laughs I used to really make myself the butt of a lot of my early jokes. And that wasn't inauthentic. Like at the time it was authentic, like it was like fresh out of high school where I wasn't cool and got picked on. And I kind of carried that over into comedy, which I think a lot of comics do. But I also think there comes a time where it's like, there's a way to be self-deprecating and there's a way to do it where it's not so sad, if that makes sense. So I think a lot of it was like, I got laughs early on for being self-deprecating, that's what I would just kind of go to. And then when I look at it now, I'm like, that's actually really sad. Like I wasn't okay, So it's weird to kind of see that. And now I feel bad now when I watch like newer comics and they're just so mean to themselves. I'm like, oh, like that's,
Do you need a hug
sad.
afterwards? Yeah.
Yeah. That's how it felt. Like looking back, I don't think I could even do those jokes now unless it was to kind of like make fun of them or shed light on where I was at that point in my life, because I think it would just be like kind of heartbreaking almost,
Do you draw parallels to that to Hannah Gatsby's journey in Nanette?
Yes,
she does talk about the self harm she was doing to herself with self-deprecating jokes and keeping them too long.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I ever thought about it in terms of like the self harm. I do think. Yeah, I guess in a way, because I felt, I don't know how to answer that. I guess that would be mood dependent, because for me personally, I never thought about it until recently, actually. An actress friend of mine who used to do comedy way back in the day, she was kind of telling me, she's like, yeah, I had to get out of comedy because the only time I would get laughs was when I was abusing myself by being so self-deprecating. And I had never thought about it like that. Because I think for me, in my mind, as long as I was getting laughs, I was getting something, and that was validation. So it actually wasn't until like, I think it was literally like a week ago that she said that to me, that I actually thought about it in those kind of terms. I think for me, it was more about making fun of myself, to kind of beat people to the punch. Because I'm like, oh, well, if I say this about myself, then it's like, I'm kind of like telling you guys, no, I know that this is what I am. So I'm cool because we all agree. Like, so I think in the time, I don't think it was harming me. I mean, honestly, if I really dived into it, maybe it was. But at the time, I didn't feel like that. I just felt like, oh, I'm getting laughs, so it's going great.
I for a lot of people, like Nanette was sort of like an awakening to thoughts on that. So it's something I've come back to in a couple different interviews with people. who mentioned self-deprecating. Now, the past year, you've written a couple sketches, but you've actually filmed one. It's got did you say 100,000 views, which is
Yeah, I think it was close to
damn
100,000
good.
last time my husband checked. Like it was, we did pretty well, but like I said, it's weird where it's like I'll forget about it, and then there'll be like a couple day period where it gets like a ton of traction again. So I guess that's just kind of how the interweb works, where
Somebody shares it, in a group that's large enough to make a blip. So
Yeah, I had a video actually. It was my top comic audition, the one that got me into the final round of it a couple years ago, go viral, and I don't really know how. Someone posted it on some comedy page that has like a bunch of followers, and it got like millions of views. And I just woke up one day and I had so many followers online and so many comments on YouTube, and I was like, what is going on? Like, was I hacked? I was so confused. I was convinced that like I got hacked, or somebody posted like a nude photo. I didn't know me was out there. I'm like, what is going on? And then Tyler Morrison messaged me and was like, you went viral. I'm like, what? So that happens with that video too, where I'll just get a bunch of messages about it, and then it'll go away for like 6 months, and then it makes the rounds again. And that, when that happened, that's when I learned, don't read the comments. And I never read actually, I'm going to see if there's any comments now. Oh, okay. So that's when I realized, don't read the comments, because it just makes you really angry. So I went through when I found where the video was posted, I went through, and a lot of them were great comments, but a lot of them were like, not so much mean, because I can take it. Like, I think people were like, you're not funny, you're not whatever. I was like, fuck you, I don't care. Sorry, I didn't mean to swear. I was like, screw you, I don't care. But then like, when anyone would say anything about my looks, I was like, I can't take this anymore. Like, I don't care if somebody says I'm not funny. Like, comedy is subjective. But when anyone would say anything like about my looks, like I literally was like scrolling through the comments, be like, did anyone say anything about me being fat? Like, that's just where my mind goes, So I was like, I can't read the comments ever. Yeah.
There is, I had one video that jumped up just like 2,000 or 3,000 views. But with YouTube, you can check to see where it's been shared.
Okay.
And it gets shared to some fetish page about hiccups. Because in the video, I'm doing the joke, and there's a woman hiccuping in the front row, and so I start using her for the timing of the joke. So I'd be pointing at her just as she hiccups, and that ended up giving me like a couple thousand views.
You know what's weird? I made a tweet about, like, when the pandemic started, we just went through a bunch of old sitcoms and watched them night after night. And I made a joke about Frasier, and someone shared it in like some Frasier fan club group. And so I got like a lot of followers on Twitter and messages about the Frasier fan club and how it was shared, and it was really bizarre. I'm like, okay, like there's something out there for everybody. But I'm like, great. Like, somebody messaged me and they're like, I just want to let you know, I found your Twitter like through the Frasier fan club. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, and they showed me, they screenshotted it for me and showed me, like, I'm like, that's hilarious. So there's something out there for everybody. And I think it's really funny when like those little things that we don't think about kind of are what get us known in these little groups who would have never had any idea about who we were.
Now, with everything else that has happened in the past year, I mean, the Mango Mussolini, to quote Martha Chavez, is been silenced. There is the trial and the conviction that came in last week. And everything, and now the rollout with the vaccines. Do you feel any sense of relief of what's coming, or?
I don't know if I'll ever feel a sense of relief. I'm such an anxiety-ridden person in general. I think I took this really hard, and I felt really selfish about it recently, because I'm like, you know what? I'm fine. I have a great marriage. I have a house. I'm fine. Our bills are paid. And there's so many people that aren't fine in Canada and all over the world. But I think for me, I spent a lot of it feeling sorry for myself, because we had literally just got green card approval right before this happened. I was in New York, like looking at neighborhoods, looking at places, come back, and then everything shut down. And I think for me, that really, I've spent the first good, like maybe 4 or 5 months, like just literally feeling sorry for myself and being like, this is awful. This is ruining my whole life. Like, this is ruining my career. And so I think it's only kind of recently that I've really tried to remind myself that like there's people that are way worse than me. There's not a time limit on, I think, I don't know how men feel, but I think for women especially, like we feel like there's a time limit where we have to like make it, you know? And
no,
I
men
feel
that
like,
too.
okay. I think yours is older than ours though.
It's a longer window for men. I will definitely admit that.
Yes. But I do feel kind of like for me, I was feeling like, okay, well, that window's closing and everything is a waste now. And I'm starting to feel a bit better about it. Like I'm starting to kind of like, you know what's really helped? Not watching the news every morning, because I also think I would wake up every morning and I would turn on the news. I would flip back between America and Canadian news, back and forth. And my whole day would be anxiety. And I mentioned to a doctor I know, and he was like, you have to stop watching the news. And I was like, okay, so I've really made an effort lately to not start my morning with the news. Maybe I'll watch a little bit about it like later on in the day if there is something really big going on, like the verdict, like the trial, like that kind of stuff I tune into. But not starting my day with the news has really kind of helped me have a good outlook on life for the rest of that day at least. But I'm just taking it day by day, because there are some days where I do just feel so incredibly like angry about everything that's happened. But there's nowhere to direct that anger. Like it's a pandemic, you know, it's not like I can write an angry letter. Like there's just nowhere to, I think, direct the anger. And I do see a lot of people kind of finding places to direct their anger, if that makes sense. And I don't want to be one of those people. Like a lot of people I see on like line on Twitter. I love Twitter, by the way. And I use it 99% only for jokes. I very rarely will type angry stuff on there or at people, angry things. Like, and I see a lot of people who used to kind of be really funny on there, just being so angry at people, like taking pictures of people not wearing masks or people out in a group or people in a park. And it's like, I just feel like they're maybe kind of going through what I'm going through too. But I think you just need to accept, like, there's nowhere to direct your anger during a global pandemic. Like, I mean, obviously we can be mad at our leaders for maybe not doing what we think they should have done. But the reality is that there was still going to be a global pandemic. Like I don't know. There's just nowhere to put that anger. And once I realized that, I think it was kind of easier for me to accept that I was just kind of being like a baby about it, to be honest.
Brian is kind of doing that and keeping funny with his Uncle Doug videos that he's been
he's doing really good. Like I've actually been he was one of those people that I was really impressed with. The way that they were handling this, you know, because obviously I think we all worried about our friends and family, but I worried more, especially about my friends I know who live alone. Because I think that would be really hard. And I think he's been really great. Like there's been so many times that like, I've just been like, are you okay? And he's like, I'm fine. Like, this is great, you know? And then they said that people who live alone could kind of, I don't know. I think I think Quebec's rules are totally different, but in Ontario, they said that if you live alone, you can kind of pick one other family to like team up with. So he's kind of done that with us. So we get to see him, you know, for Sunday dinners and that kind of stuff. And I think that's been really great. But I think at first I was kind of like, oh, well, he needs this. And then I was like, no, I need it. Like, you know, this is just as much for me as it is for him, you know?
Yeah.
Like just because I don't live alone doesn't make this like, I think it makes it a bit easier, but it's still hard. Like, I think we're all finding a piece of this hard in our own way, except for maybe like Jeff Bezos or something who's just racking it in.
Yeah, definitely. What is it? 200% growth in his company in the past year.
You know, I try not to use Amazon, man, but like it's just so convenient. Like, especially now. I think you guys were doing this before Ontario was, but now like we can't buy non-essential stuff. Like at the Loblaws, even I was doing like my online grocery order and I could buy baking stuff, but I couldn't buy a cake pan. And little things like that drive me to Amazon. Cause like, what else am I going to do? You know, I had to bake my husband birthday cake. I didn't have a cake pan. Or a cake pan. So I think, I don't know, man, Amazon's just part of our life and it sucks. But until the pandemic's over, like, how am I going to get stuff?
In Quebec, I think they sort of recognized that was stupid when somebody posted a video going through a pharmacy, just going, sunglasses are essential, mittens and scarves are not, and it is January.
Well, we just started it. We just started it, I think, 3 weeks ago. But in pharmacies, you can buy anything. It's only the non-essential stuff in like Walmarts and Costco's and like Loblaws. It's so stupid. But
Yeah, what some people consider essential, other people don't. And who's making this decision?
yeah, like in the Walmart, people were just filming videos here at the Walmart in Toronto, and like you couldn't buy a bra. And you couldn't buy, the other one was like the whole kids section was closed, which included diapers, and people were like, what? So I think, I don't know who decides what's essential and what's not, but I don't know how long it's going to last here. Or Dollarama can only sell like their food aisles. They had to close school supplies, which I thought was crazy because at the time they did that, the schools were still open. So I'm like, why is your school supply aisle have to be closed? But anyway, it's a nightmare.
Yeah. And did you just start with the curfew thing or no?
No, we didn't do a curfew.
You have, okay, because that is the worst thing that's happening here right now.
I've heard about that. And you know what? When we had talked about it, when there was a big news thing, like when he did his last announcement a couple of weeks ago, and everyone was like, oh my God, there might be a curfew. I was having such anxiety about it. Like, why am I having anxiety about it? Like I go to bed by like 9 o'clock. But I think I was just worried how people would react to it. But we're not doing that here. We just did. I don't know if you heard about him giving the police like just crazy powers, but then they took it back because all the cops were like, we're not doing this. There was that. And then non-essential businesses had to close again, even though they just opened, and they opened patios for 4 days and then closed them down, which was just dumb, but that was it. No curfew.
Like in the past 12 months, bars were open here for maybe 2 to 3 weeks. That was it.
Yeah, we had last summer. They were open. They got an extended patio season, and bars who didn't even had a patio got to take over part of a lot of the streets. So that worked really well, and that was supposed to start again this year. But then randomly, our government made an announcement a couple months ago that were like, because it was going through like a warm patch, and they were like, hey, bars can open tomorrow. So all these bars and restaurants, like just on patios, but all these bars and restaurants were like, oh my God, like we don't have staff. They spent so much money rushing to open their patios. And then literally 4 days later, they were like, oh, sorry, we made a mistake. You all have to close. And so many people wasted so much money on like ordering stuff, paying their staff. Like it was such a cluster.
Yeah, so many politicians are flip-flopping, and it's just been, and they're doing it mainly for the people who are financially backing them, like benefit, and
absolutely,
it's like they try to fulfill promises to those people, and then they realize how stupid they're doing. For us having a curfew, it's currently 8 p.m. It's supposed to be going back up to 9:30. I have anxiety as well, but to if I want to exercise and go outside and enjoy fresh air, what I had been doing before the curfew was going out at 1 a.m. and taking a walk, because there would be less people around. And now if I want to take a walk, I've got to be dodging crowds.
That would give you anxiety as well.
Yeah.
Like I'm very fortunate, like I have a yard. So I'm very fortunate and we also live across the street from a really big park, which I'll go to in off-peak hours. Like I'll go at like 11 in the morning, and there's not a lot of people there. I mean, there's people living there. We have a lot of people in tents who are homeless that have been living in the park for over a year, which is another issue because it's very sad. And I think everyone thought that they would be gone in the winter, but a lot of them stuck out the winter, and it's fine. Like they're not bothering me when I go through the park. That's not my issue. It just sucks because the city, I think everyone here
housing.
Well, I just feel like they haven't also tried enough to have enough housing, Yeah. I don't know how it is there. I don't know if you guys have a lot of tent cities happening.
There was a tent city, and then the police broke it up, and but they did convert an ex-hospital into housing.
Well, I feel like we have a lot of empty space here that they could do that, and I don't know why they're not. Or a lot of concert venues that can't be open. I don't know. So I've been kind of doing that in off-peak hours, but I feel really bad for people who don't have any yard space, and their only option is to kind of go out when everybody else is out.
Do you have a prediction when things will be opening up again, when you'll have a chance to be on stage?
Summer.
Summer?
I think the summer. I think it'll be like for here how it was last summer, clubs opened and then closed. Because the numbers went down in the summer and then went back up. So I think I feel like it's going to be like that again. I feel like we'll open in the summer and then do outdoor shows again. But I don't know. And I got to tell you, it's really sad, not sad, but I'm really jealous of seeing like comics in the States performing and going on tour and kind of living life. And it makes me sad.
Texas comedy clubs never closed, but they have such a big spike right now. So
Yeah.
I was talking to a comedian was living in Detroit, and just a lot of comedians moved to Texas.
I just heard Jason Rouse moved to Texas.
Really?
So Brian told me that the other day. And I was like, what? And then so he was like, a lot of people are moving to Texas. I'm like, really? And I guess that's what it is. It's like they go where the work are. And I know that's what I get mad about with people shaming. Because I would see people online shaming comics for working and going on tour, or for people being in a crowded park. And it's like, you can't shame people. Like, people have to work. They have to make a living. And just because they're doing something that you don't necessarily agree with, I think direct your anger towards the people who make the laws, or the people who don't provide adequate unemployment, or the people, who have made it so those things are open in the first place. Like, don't direct it at the person who's trying to like make their livelihood. So I get really mad at that kind of stuff.
It's also a safety issue. Like, currently I live with somebody who's immune suppressed. And so that's part of the reason why my anxiety is built over all this time, is trying to keep it around. I've had somebody try to reach to take the mask off my face.
Oh my God. Are you serious?
Yeah. And Montreal is kind of like the conspiracy theory home it's a home of conspiracy theories in Canada.
I didn't realize that. I saw videos from Montreal, and it felt weird because it didn't feel like I was watching something in Canada.
Yeah.
But we have the anti-masker parades and stuff. They go down our street every weekend, and they congregate in the park across the street from our house. But for the most part, they don't bother you directly. Like, if you just kind of keep your head down and walk by, they kind of leave you alone. That's been my experience. I know there's people who've had other experiences, but I generally don't ever go
to go them.
Downtown.
As soon as you see them, kind of leave them alone. Kind of
exactly. Thing. Like, I don't want to really argue with anybody. But that's awful. Like, I would not take kindly to somebody trying to touch my face or take a mask off my face at all.
No, definitely not. So, all right. One of the things that has happened, though, is that you've mentioned the Zoom shows and all that. There's been a lot of online stuff, such as the show you're currently on right now. Do you think all of this stuff will kind of go away with the interview shows, the amount of people who've got into podcasting since the lockdown? Or I
think that'll stick around for a bit.
There's a lot of panel shows as well have opened up online. Which is something that like a lot of Canadians enjoy, but we don't produce any of. It's more considered a British humor thing. So do you think it's going to stick around, at least stick around for a little bit until people feel safer going to the clubs? Is that your opinion?
I don't even think it's about going safer. Like, I do think there's people who maybe are into this stuff that the club maybe wasn't accessible for them, or maybe they couldn't afford it, or maybe there wasn't enough wheelchair friendly. I think things like that are people with social anxiety. Like, I've seen a lot of posts from people talking about how great this is for them because they have a hard time being in public in general. So I do think there's people, I think it will stick around. But I also do think that maybe not 5 years from now, I don't know, definitely in the future, I do think there's going to be that like stand-up boom again, because I think it will just be so long that it will become like, Shorty, come here, Shorty. I think that will be like, come here. That will be like a Shorty, come here. I think it'll be like a boom again. Do you know what I mean? Because people it'll be like a niche all over again.
There's a lot of people saying the Roaring Twenties is going to come back.
I do agree with that too.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a lot more corporate than the Roaring Twenties, but Shorty, come here. But I think that will happen.
Now, with so many people learning that they can work from home, and businesses learning that they don't have to be paying rent on these big spaces, office spaces downtown. Do you think that's going to drive more people to be able to live in a downtown area? I know you said that you don't go downtown much anymore, but do you think that's going to revitalize cities in Canada?
Well, I do live downtown. I should preface that. I do technically live downtown, but when I say like, I'm not going to go hang out at Yonge and Dundas Square, which is like our big hub, Yeah. But like, I live downtown adjacent. Like, I live in a neighborhood that just happens to be downtown. So I don't know, because I feel like I honestly, I have no idea. I know rent in Toronto is at a historic low.
Yep.
But the houses keep going up. So I have no idea. I think people who can afford houses in Toronto are buying them because they don't want to be trapped in little condos or working from home. And I think anybody who maybe couldn't but could afford a house like outside of the city has left the city to go buy houses there. But I know, like, I kind of always look at real estate stuff just because I'm curious. And I know condos, like, maybe 4 months ago were at such a historic low. Like, they were all going for asking price or below asking price, which just hasn't happened here in a long time. And rent is lower than it has been percentage wise in a long time. So I think people are leaving the city kind of, but I think they'll eventually come back. Like, I think once in-person learning happens again for a lot of the universities and stuff here, I think people will kind of have to come back. But I do think a lot of businesses are going to look at this as a way to save money and not have to pay rent and pay overhead and all that stuff. So I do think there is a lot of the work from home stuff is going to stick around for a while.
Yeah, I agree with it. I remember though, like, aging myself here, in the late '90s when I first started going to Toronto, I noticed like at 6 p.m. the downtown core was kind of dead. And if a lot of businesses are moving out of there and there's a lot more condos and such going up, do you think like a younger population is going to move in and that's going to kind of revitalize the downtown to have a late night vibe that it didn't have
Well, here's
before?
the thing about that. That's what I was looking at the other day, because it's like, where are they going to go? Everything's closing. Like, I don't know how it is where everything is closing. All the small businesses. I live on a street just off Queen West. All the businesses are closing, and they're all turning into weed shops, and I don't know why. But every store, like, I literally counted 12 in like a 5-block radius. Like, it's insane. So, but a lot of these little bars are closing. A lot of these little venues are closing. So it's like, where's the nightlife going to go? Like, I don't know. It's like, okay, well, you've turned this one area of downtown that used to be such great nightlife into condo. It's like, okay, but where are they going to hang out at night? You know, like, the weed shops all close at 8. You can't even, like, I don't know where they're going to go. So I do hope that a lot of these like smaller bars and stuff can maybe come back, even if it does have to be in another location. But I think a lot of the small businesses can't afford the downtown rent anymore.
It's good insight. Hopefully, like these bars, they can like put a hiatus on their liquor license so they can reopen in a new space once it's safe to do so.
I don't know how it works here. I don't know how our liquor
I
licensing
don't know.
works.
I don't know how that would work either, but it was just something that kind of occurred to me at that point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so, because I think it's really sad seeing a lot of them close.
Yep. Well, you said that you might need to be gone by 9. We are 5 minutes to 9 at this point in time. Michelle, this has been a pleasure talking to you.
You're so late for me. I gotta go to sleep.
All right, go to sleep. I thought there was something about the husband having a late night meeting or something. So
He's actually doing his stuff in the bedroom. He literally works all day, comes home and works. He's directing a series right now, so he's like in work mode. But he was like, he might even be asleep. Like, he was decided to do all his work in the bedroom. So last time I looked before I started, he was like lying in bed doing all his work online. But a lot of times he has to do a lot of Zoom calls and stuff. So I just want to make sure we weren't, because sometimes if I'm talking really loud and he's talking really loud, it just doesn't work. But he kind of cornered himself in the bedroom to do all his work tonight. So.
okay. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. It's good to see you again. All the best. The new album, the last album, is available online, and people can find out information about it from your Twitter.
Yes, it's called Botoxic. It's available everywhere that things are available online. But if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see it in my bio, or I'm sure I still post about it a lot. So come find it.
Yeah, there we go. And I will just put that on screen so people can find that. So Botoxic, it's available everywhere. You can find comedy albums. I'm Paul Ash. My guest today has been Michelle Shaughnessy. Michelle can be found at Michelle. Now, is it Michelle S Funny or Michelle's Funny?
Michelle's Funny.
Michelle's Funny on
I mean,
Twitter.
either way works. However you want to pronounce it, it'll get you to the same place.
And when shows do open up again, please go see her when she's performing live in your community. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we're